Hey guys, welcome back. A few of you have been asking what to call me, so in the meantime, how about you just call me Em? I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Paranormal or supernatural experiences that cause people to question reality. Story 1. Hurricane Sandy. I lived on Long Island, which was pretty badly hit. A tree had fallen in my backyard and crashed through my roof, and one of the branches penetrated the ceiling in an upstairs bedroom. The tree had essentially cut my roof in half and was laying in my attic. Power had gone out shortly afterwards, and we were without power or water for 9 days. One night during that week, I'd come home from a friend's house around midnight. We had a fireplace in the living room that I would sit by and smoke cigarettes. 6 years smoke-free now. I'm sitting there in the pitch-black living room, minimal light coming through the windows, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going crazy. I'm seeing stuff move all around this room. I was sober, most definitely not hallucinating. The best way I can describe it was shadows moving all around the dark room. I decided it was very strange and my eyes were playing tricks on me. I went to walk downstairs to my room, and as I passed the stairs leading up, I heard voices in my mother's room. I chalked it up to her having her TV on. No big deal. The next morning, I'm in the kitchen making coffee, and my mom comes down and says, "Was there an earthquake last night?" I'm more or less after her and confirmed there was definitely no earthquake, and I asked her why. Her response is something I'll never forget. I woke up around midnight and my entire bed was shaking, almost coming off the floor. At the same time, I heard the voices coming from her room. I hastily anointed all doorways in the house with salt at the base and affirmed only light lived there. Never anything negative like that ever happened again. And while we're here, sorry this is so long, but this is another good one. When I was super young, maybe 4 or 5, I remember waking up and seeing a girl in white staring at my bedroom door. I was looking at a side profile of her. I was so scared. I went under my blankets and didn't come out. The only reason I remember it so vividly is because it was summer and I was so hot under there that I was sweating. And I just wanted to come out, but I was too scared. I never told anyone in all of my life thinking I made this up. When it was a super real bad dream. Flash forward 18 years, I'm sitting in my apartment getting drunk with my older sister and I tell her this story. As I describe the ghost, she knocks her glass of wine off the arm of the chair. She then informs me that when she lived in that room in high school, she saw the exact same ghost. And the reason she remembers it so vividly was because she woke up, saw the ghost staring out the window, and said, "Amy," our oldest sister, "go away, you're scaring me." Same ghost a decade apart. Neither of us had ever told anyone else our stories. It was at that moment I realized I wasn't making my memory up. Stories like this always freak me out, mainly because it's so weird when people see the same thing, so many years apart, and different people. These are the kind of stories where I think I'm more inclined to believe that something actually happened compared to just a bad dream. Story 2. My sister, 11, and I, 13, were living at this condo with my mom and her boyfriend. And it was a little home with 2 rooms in which my sister and I had bunk beds, so we slept with each other in the same room. But one night, I started experiencing sleep paralysis and had seen this tall black figure just staring at me with red eyes. And at first, I thought it a dream, but I could feel every sensation of my body, so I knew it was real. But what I was looking at wasn't. I didn't know what sleep paralysis was until my sister told me about it. Soon after that experience, I started having a chain of them for about 4 months. And each time got worse and worse. And eventually, I started to see things like faces or people walking down the hall, almost like ghosts were roaming and living there. No one believed me and thought I was lying for attention. I tried telling my sister, but she told me she wasn't falling for it, since her and I would always make creepy stories to scare each other. But I honestly was scared to death by the things happening in the house. It wasn't until my family had a cookout with all my other family that my sister experienced something even scarier. She didn't tell me until she became 16. So my sister and my mom's boyfriend would always play hide and seek with each other and try to scare one another. While everyone was outside enjoying the cookout and the kids were playing with each other, my mom's boyfriend asked my sis if she could go inside and grab a couple of spices for the meat. So my sister went inside and grabbed them, was about to come out until she saw a hand holding onto the door of my mom's bedroom. My sister told me that she stared at the hand for a good 5 seconds before it pulled away from the door, almost as if it was asking her to follow it. My sister assumed it was my mom's boyfriend and walked into the room and called him out, saying she wasn't scared since she'd seen his hand on the door. My parents' bedroom had a clear view of the backyard, and when my sister looked through it, she saw everyone was still outside and realized that no one was in the house with her at the time, and she totally freaked out. Before that event happened, my sister and I always felt that my mom's bedroom was always cold and felt heavy in sort of a ghostly way. After that, we moved out a year later. Didn't have any sleep paralysis, and my sister didn't see anything creepy after that. Totally creepy stuff has happened a lot in that condo, like channels on the TV changing on its own, seeing balls of light at around 2 a.m., and hearing footsteps outside of my room. I'd always heard stories about ghosts and other paranormal things, but living there has made me believe that such things can exist, and I don't question it, and just believe it's real, since I don't have any explanation for any of it. Okay, I'm not sure if I've talked about this on this channel before, but I've had sleep paralysis before a little bit. As in, I just kind of woke up and couldn't move. I didn't really feel anything, but I've heard from a lot of people that really creepy things can happen, like you see things or feel things. And I think that made me at the beginning of the story believe that maybe OP was just experiencing sleep paralysis. But then add in the creepy hand that the sister saw while awake, and I don't know, OP, I think you might have been right that that condo was haunted. I think Disney could make another movie. Instead of calling it Haunted Mansion, call it Haunted Condo. Story 3. When I was a kid, my grandma and I talked a lot about ghosts because she actively believed in the paranormal. Being the innocent kid I was, I asked her to give me a sign when she passed away. Years later, when I was around 13, I had long forgotten the conversation with my grandma. It was Christmas Eve, and she didn't answer any family members' calls. I was her favorite. After her cancer treatment, it was me she wanted to see. It was me who wanted to take care of her. I knew that morning that she died. It was weird. I just knew it. We kept calling and calling till my dad went on his own to her place. Found her dead. She had apparently taken her life. She took a bunch of her pain pills, had a glass of wine, and died shortly after. My dad and his girlfriend at the time stayed at her house the entire day while talking to police. They had to take statements and everything. Meanwhile, I stayed home with my sister. I was in the bath upset trying to process stuff when there was a knock on the door. We had those cloudy-looking glass shower doors that you can't see through. So assuming it was my younger sister needing to grab a hairbrush or something, I told her she could run in and grab it. There was no answer though. I got out of the shower and went into the living room to find my sister asleep. I woke her up and asked what she wanted, and she had no idea what I was talking about. A few months later, the promise/sign I asked of my grandma popped in my head, and suddenly I was remembering it again. It was weird. Since then, it's been 11 years. I've had incredibly detailed dreams about my grandma. I rarely remember my dreams, and when I do, they are never this clear. I remember one in particular where my grandma sat me down and was talking about life as there was a stressful event going on. It was like she was really there with me. I remember asking her in the dream how it was possible that I was talking to her because she passed away, and she would just shrug off the question and move on with advice. When I woke up after that dream, I realized I was crying in my sleep. It was the first time I had ever done that. It still feels unreal. First, OP, I'm really sorry for your loss. But secondly, that's kind of amazing that your grandma still found a way to be with you, even though it's just in your dreams. But the way you make it sound is that she's actually giving you advice, which, I don't know, sounds pretty amazing. Story 4. My family had just moved into our brand new house. We had it built when my brother was 7 and I was 6. In our old house, my brother and I had to share a bedroom. But in the new house, we had our own. Naturally, we missed each other's company, so I slept in his room with him. In the new house, my parents' bedroom was downstairs and our rooms were upstairs. Being young kids, we developed separation anxiety and would often go downstairs and sleep on our living room sofas in order to be closer to our parents. One night, he and I were particularly anxious. Not sure what spawned this. Instead of just laying down on the sofa, as we decided the only safe place was in our parents' bedroom, we had snuck into their room before because this was a fairly common occurrence. My parents kept a cot on the floor for us, but this night of all nights, they had the door locked for obvious reasons. Just a disclosure, I understood back then as well how air pressure worked. When a lightweight door is cracked and the air conditioner comes on, it can force the door shut. As we're standing in the doorway just waiting there, we both look across the living room door at our laundry room. No clue what prompted us both to look at the same time. Kids have some weird intuition. The door was wide open and out of nowhere, slammed shut very forcefully. This was a very lightweight door, and the only way to shut it was to physically assist it the whole way until it latched, so air pressure from the AC turning on isn't a possibility. Naturally, we freaked the F out and began banging on my parents' door. After waking them up, we had our dad investigate it. Of course, he didn't find anything, and he and my mom wrote it in offices having wild imaginations. To this day, I have no clue what happen. I know this story doesn't sound very scary, but put yourself in the mind of a 6 and 7-year-old for a better perspective. That area of the house gave me creeps up to the day I moved away for college. Story 5. I used to live in an area where chickens were headed, specifically my brother's room. And one day we decided to do some stuff to it. Can't remember what, I was like 6 at the time, which required digging under the house. So my father dug most of it out on the first day and planned to leave the rest for the next day. When he did return the next day, overnight dirt had materialized where he dug it to the same height even. But the pile of dirt from yesterday remained. He dug it again the next day, planning again to finish resting the next day, and the same thing happened. Same house. While I was asleep, still like 6 to 7 at the time, my mother would walk into my room as she went to bed. All right in line at 11 o'clock, all my toys and other electric stuff would go off at once. Planes would fly around, lights would flash, but I remained asleep. Still this house. My mother was at the table eating lunch. She heard our back door swing open and softly close. She called out, "Hey honey," thinking it was my father. No response. She assumed he didn't hear. 20 seconds later, and my father walks in. She says, "Didn't you hear me earlier?" He goes, "No, I've just come back from shopping." Once we got adjusted to the chicken ghost and they us. They left us alone more or less. Our toilet seats would randomly open and all my toys would go off. But overall, they calmed down. Later, we discovered there was also an early settler couple living there by a friend who looked after our house. For non-Australia's early settlers, late 1770s. And now other shorter ones from other places and people. My friend was trying to sleep one night. Her taps on his door got louder to the point his door literally shook. And when expected, it was discovered it was beaten to the point that the nails holding the hinge were bending and loose. People can be seen randomly down my friend's hallway. There are ghosts populating his house. Everyone who lives there can see them and they check out. I asked one of his ghost names right now and went to the next person and asked them. They'd all get the same location. He is described as a later age man. Reading for this channel, I've heard all kinds of stories, from pirates to sirens to even old ladies sitting in the corner. But I don't think I've ever heard of ghost chickens before. Chalk that up to the new one for the day. Story 6. Let me preface this with saying that prior to this event, I hadn't slept for 60 hours. Freaking international flights, gosh darn it. So it could have very well been entirely imagined, and likely was, as there are no similar events that have ever happened to me. I also have very vivid dreams that are hyper-realistic, so it's possible that I was so exhausted my brain began breaking down, like exactly. Basically, I got back from a tour of Europe with my family and we arrived home around 3 p.m. We forced ourselves to stay awake until around 9 or 10 p.m. in order to minimize horrible jet lag the next day, and I was the last to go to sleep around 10:30. However, our bathroom is across the living room from the bedroom hallway, so after showering I had to pass through there and therefore pass the sliding glass door to the backyard. Unfortunately, we had forgotten to turn on our backyard light, so it was pitch black. But as I was passing, I thought I saw something out there. Not unusual to see movement, as it could be a tree, rat, possum, or a squirrel, but this looked different to any of these. I go closer and take a look, and my eyes begin to adjust to the darkness outside. All of a sudden, what looks like a black figure comes into focus, with a featureless face. From what I could tell, and it is facing straight towards me. He's standing perfectly still, but on the edge of the door, I can see other figures beginning to creep into my line of sight. I get the freak out of there and run to my room, locking the door behind me. Since I'm not religious, I didn't really know what to do. So I just put a chair up against my door to keep it from opening and laid in bed for a while with the lights on, until exhaustion forced me to just pass out. Story 7. I was trying to transition over from a day job to night shift by staying up the night before to get my sleeping schedule altered. I actually had a week to fix my sleeping schedule, but I kept falling and falling asleep when I laid down to rest my eyes. Stupid, I know. I laid down again and just closed my eyes when I heard someone walking up the stairs. With the house being 140 plus years old, you can hear everyone's movements. Old creaky house. But yeah, one problem. I was the only one who was and was supposed to be at home. I was terrified thinking it was a burglar. I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. Thought, hey, he could just steal anything he wanted and leave me be if he thought I didn't witness anything. The dumb thing about all this is that my room is literally filled with swords and daggers. Yeah, I have an arsenal of weapons and chose to play possum. I closed my eyes and heard my bedroom door open and footsteps creaking across the floor to my bed. Then I felt someone leaning over me and felt breathing, not cold or hot, on the back of my neck. I was pretty sure I was dead meat. A man's voice asked in a patronizing tone, clear to this day. Do you really think you should be doing that? I sat up and did nothing. Nobody was there. My bedroom door was closed. A quick inspection of the house turned up empty, and there were no more noises. On the bright side, I was far from tired now. My heart was racing a million miles a minute, it felt like. I wondered for a moment whether I just experienced sleep paralysis, but I'm very, very confident I didn't, as I didn't even have time to fall asleep. Story 8. I was walking home from the school with my best friend one winter afternoon. It was a cold but sunny day in the park. It was covered in a thin layer of that really light snow, the one that acts like dust. It was also a traditional celebration where you dress in costumes in order to scare the winter away. I went as a clown that year and I had a red nose and everything. As we were walking through the completely empty park and elaborating on the rules and characteristics of our own fantasy world, the wind started to pick up and suddenly there was a small tornado coming our way. It reached us very quickly and it snatched my red nose from my nose. It went swirling up and then whoosh, nothing. No tornado, no red nose. It all vanished. I remember it every now and then and it still puzzles me. I know we were kids with a very active imagination, visiting 10 spots with men of creatures on every step of the way home. So making something like that up isn't out of the question. But I remember distinctly how thoroughly shaken up we both were, and how we couldn't stop talking about it, and the fact that my clown costume is missing the red nose from that day onward. If I can be honest, this kind of sounds like a story that somebody makes up to their parents to explain why they lost part of their costume, so their parents don't get mad at them. But if it did actually happen, I feel bad for you, OP. A mystery tornado sounds pretty scary. Story 9. This all took place when I was younger, probably around 6 or 7. I was spending the night at my aunt's house, who was also my neighbor at the time. The upstairs has a spare bedroom that I would sleep in while my aunt and uncle's bed was downstairs right off the bottom of the staircase. A streetlight shines in through the only window in the spare bedroom onto a wall, with typical house decor, more specifically what I describe as an artsy mobile. Mobile like the thing that parents put over babies' cribs that have animals on them and play songs. But this had feathers, gemstones, and a dream catcher type thing in the middle, and I was suspended by a twine string that hung from the wall. So I wake up at some specific time. I can't remember now, 2 or 3 a.m., still laying in bed, my eyes open to that artsy mobile no longer hanging, but string tautly held against the wall, and the feathers and gemstones and such were pressed against the ceiling. Just to type this gives me fits of cold chills. I pieced out, walked home. Now thinking back, it could have been some play on light that made the mobile look this way, but I have no way to tell now. Story 10. I used to live with a few friends, and a good few years ago now. One night I had ordered pizza and went downstairs to collect it. Once I got that, "Your food is on its way" text. Because my housemate who was home was already in bed, and I didn't want him to be woken up by the doorbell. I heard a noise or something coming from the top of the stairs and turned around to see what it was, expecting my friend or girlfriend. All I saw was what looked like a young girl's arm being pulled away from view behind the wall. It was fairly quick, so all I remember was that it was either wearing a blue sleeve where the arm was and was kind of blue. But it definitely freaked me out a bit that I saw something where I heard the noise. I remember assuring that it was my friend, maybe checking who was up after hearing me, even though his arm would have been like 2 times longer, or my girlfriend. Friend was asleep and my girlfriend hadn't moved from bed, and even if she did, she would have made a lot more noise getting to and from the top of the stairs. Lots of other freaky stuff happened in that house, but a lot of it is easier to find a decent explanation for. That sounds pretty terrifying to think, I just want some pizza, and then all of a sudden see little girl's arm. I think that would probably ruin my appetite. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also,